In this video I'm going to show you how I go about creating a cross-country soaring task using Plan G to create the flight plan, and then using FSX to create some suitable weather, date and time, and setting up the soaring environment with CumulusX. It's the task I'm going to create is going to be just a simple goal-based task, not a full-on competition racing task. For creating competition racing tasks in a multiplayer environment, it's a little bit more involved, and I would suggest, if you're interested in that, you should join the UK Virtual Gliding Association, where task development is amply covered in their forums and in the documentation for members. Now I've chosen Aboyne in Scotland as my launch point for this task. It's the home of the D-side gliding club. The airfield is located to the west, the west of Aberdeen. I'll get my east and west right yet. So this is Aboyne. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Probably not. But in Plan G, to start a flight plan, we just right click on the airfield, select Start Flight Plan. Now I'm actually going to add some glider turn points to my plan. Now these were downloaded from the UK Virtual Gliding Association, but you can create your own turn points in Plan G or convert some from the turn point exchange. I'll just zoom in a bit. My first leg, I'm going down to Braemar, and I'm going to use the turn point over the Braemar Sports Stadium. Then I'm looking now for Quilgarth Castle, which is that turn point, I believe. Add that to my flight plan, and then straight back to the airfield. So now we've got a completed flight plan, triangular flight plan. I couldn't guarantee that when we actually fly it that we will see these specific landmarks that I've selected as turn points, but since I'll be using the competition glide computer in the Discus X, it will guide me around the course anyway. The course length is shown down here in the flight plan summary box here. The total distance is just under 44 nautical miles, so it's a very short task actually, much shorter than we normally fly in a session. The other thing to note is the terrain along the flight plan and this plan elevation window. As you can see, I'm going to be passing over some terrain around close to 3,000 feet to peak there. So my cloud base is going to have to be, we might try 4,500 feet. We should be able to squeak through there. Doesn't give you a lot of headroom, but I'm hoping that we can either go around the terrain or get enough height to slip over the top and carry on. It's a little bit problematic. Cross-country gliding, it's not always an easy task. I could set the cloud base a bit higher, but it starts to get unrealistic, and also it can actually get more difficult to find the thermals, particularly if you're low down and you've got very high clouds. So the next thing we need to do, we've established that we probably need we're going to try a cloud base of 4,500 feet above mean sea level. So what we're going to do now is just export the flight plan to Flight Simulator. So we'll go to the File tab, the Export option, and we want to export Flight Simulator X flight plan. It's already configured to go to the right folder. It's the same folder where all my saved flights and flight plans are kept in for Flight Simulator 10. So I'll save that, and I've got a warning here that there is a flight plan of that name already in existence. I'm not sure what it is, so I'll just replace it with the one I've just designed. And we're done. Flight plan is complete. So now we can go into Flight Simulator and start creating the soaring environment. Right, here we are. We've loaded up the Discus X in Flight Simulator. We're at Aboyne. I guess that's the D-side gliding clubhouse there. First thing we've got to do is load up that flight plan that we created in Plan G. So we go to the Flights menu, Flight Planner, load, that's the one we want there, open that, just quickly check that in the editor, yes it's correct flight plan, so we can OK that, and no we don't want to relocate our aircraft, we're already there. So now the C4 competition computer, when we fire it up, we'll know where we're going, as will the GPS unit if we use that. So what I'm going to do now is just show you my weather settings. So I'm going to Option Settings, Display, Weather. These are I run with all the time for gliding. So I keep the cloud draw distance down to 60 miles, mainly for performance reasons. Thermal visualization is obviously none because it only applies to the default thermals in FSX, which are disabled when we're using CumulusX. For the simulation settings, they're not really applicable to us, so we've unchecked these and put the rate of weather change back to 0. Clouds, I do like detail clouds. These are the FSX clouds, and they sort of will help us sort of hide the CumulusX clouds a little bit, make it look a bit more natural. And I've pushed that cloud coverage density up to maximum. And that's about it there. So we just cancel that because we're not changing anything. Then we have to look at the CumulusX settings. Now my CumulusX is auto started with FSX. So I've got it down here on the taskbar. I can just click on that to open it. First thing to check is that everything is green here, and more importantly, these two boxes are checked and this button is green. If that's grey, then you've disabled it, so make sure that's green. Then we go into the Tools menu, Configuration. The first thing you must do here is reset it, because you want everything to go back to defaults. Now, with everything at defaults, you can actually fly like that. In fact, I often do. Nothing really wrong with any of these settings. So, in fact, the ceiling, the thermal ceiling settings here aren't really applicable when you're using a cumulus layer in FSX. They're only applicable if you're using blue thermals. So we can pretty much ignore those. Now, just to make it a bit more interesting for myself, flying this task, I am going to tweak them a little bit today. I'm going to reduce the strength of the thermals a bit. So I'll bring them back to 2, the minimum, and then the maximum I'll bring down to 4.5. So that'll make it a little bit more challenging. And the thermal diameter, I'll reduce the maximum down to 1600 meters. That'll make it just a little bit harder to center the thermals. A marginal difference, not a huge difference. Thermal duration I'll leave as is, with a minimum of 20 minutes, maximum of 40 minutes. Now the thermals, although the bulk of them will sit within that range of 20 minutes to 40 minutes, obviously you're going to have outliers in a random distribution, so you will get clouds and thermals that will only last a few minutes. But the bulk of them should be within that range, 20 to 40. Thermal coverage, normally I would fly with 5 per 10 square kilometres. But in this case, because I'm at the last 2 legs of this triangular course I'm going to fly, typically, for a large portion of it, above 2,000 feet, because of the hills we're flying over, I might just give myself a better chance by increasing that to 6. It could be, one extra thermal there in a 10 by 10 kilometre area that might save my bacon. All the rest I'll leave as is. So I'll OK that to make those changes, and I'll actually save that. In fact, I've already got one there, but I'll just overwrite that one. Now, what you've got to be careful of here, when you're trying to close this window, don't use the close button there, because that closes CumulusX. So it's goodbye to all lift if you close CumulusX. So just minimise it. Right, so that's the CumulusX settings done. Now, we need to have a look and see if we've got any thermals. Just because everything was green doesn't mean we've got thermals. So we go into add-ons, CumulusX debug. Now the thing to note here, firstly, we don't have any active thermals. The thermal energy is 1.79. Now that's low, but it's still high enough to produce some thermals. So what's going on then? If we look at the sky, you've probably noticed we've got stratus cloud. This is the lowest layer here. And CumulusX will not produce any thermals, even blue thermals, if you've got stratus cloud as your dominant or lower layer. Even if you've got a 1/8 coverage, still won't produce thermals. So for starters, we've got to fix that. So we're going to world weather. Now the first thing we need to do here is go to weather themes and clear skies. This will globally clear out all weather settings or previous weather settings. So that's cleared everything out. Let's just have a look. Where's CumulusX? Just have a look at the debug screen again. Notice we've got some active thermals now. The thermal energy is still around the same because we haven't changed the date and time yet. We'll do that later. But we do have some thermals now. But there's no thermal clouds in the sky anywhere. Okay. What we have done is we've created blue thermals, and yeah, I'm not keen about flying cross country in blue thermals. So we do need to fix this. So we'll go back into world weather, and now we'll go to user defined weather, customize, advanced weather. So as I said before, we need a cumulus layer. If we're going to get CumulusX to produce cumulus clouds, we need a cumulus layer. So we'll add a cloud layer. By default it's cumulus. We'll drag that up so that the base is where we want it today, or where we want to try it, which is 4,500 feet above mean sea level. I believe you can select thunderstorms too. They will work with CumulusX. They're probably cumulonimbus clouds in reality, but yeah, either of those seem to work. So, but cumulus it is today. Turbulence. Oh, first of all, cloud coverage. Scattered 3/8 is fine. That's the default. I typically work between 3/8 and 5/8. It really doesn't matter. You can go down to 1/8, you'll still get CumulusX clouds. It's just that they'll be standing out a bit amongst a very scattered FSX cloud coverage. So 3/8 generally looks pretty good. I'll leave it at that. Turbulence and icing we don't want. Turbulence in particular is nonsense really in FSX. It's horrible. It doesn't work well. It particularly doesn't work well with gliders. Has quite a bad effect on them and their instruments. Precipitation. You could actually run with a bit of light rain, but it does affect the lift from CumulusX. But today we're not going to have any precipitation. We'll leave the cloud tops where they are. What I will do is I will add another cloud layer just for appearance sake. So I'll add a high layer of cirrus. We're going to make this cirrus. We'll bump that layer up to 7/8. I'm not sure it actually works that well with the textures I'm using, but or makes any difference, I should say, with the Rex textures I'm currently using. But anyway, we'll have a high layer of cirrus. That won't affect the cumulus clouds at all. Again, we'll leave all the turbulence and icing and precipitation alone. We will add some wind. The default layer I'll make 4 knots. I'll try and drag this around to the northwest. 300 degrees seems good. Don't want turbulence or gusts again. Not a good thing in default FSX. If you need these sorts of features, you're going to have to use weather from one of the add-on weather engines that controls this sort of thing in more realistically. Shear strength also I'll keep at minimum. There is a bug in FSX in certain terrain. If you only have one wind layer, regardless of how big you make that wind layer or what wind strength you choose, you can end up with a situation with no wind downwind of your terrain. To get around that bug, you need at least one extra wind layer. So we'll add another one. By default goes to 5,000, which is fine. We'll bump that one up to 8 knots. So FSX will interpolate the wind between 8 knots down to 4 knots. Around about cloud base we'll probably be seeing around 5 or 6 knots. What we have to do though, if we don't want wind shear effects, we need to drag the wind slider around to match. What am I doing? To match the lower layer. So we want both layers coming at 300 degrees or very close to it. So that's our wind done. Temperature. I haven't set the date and time yet, but I'm going to be flying in summertime, so I'm going to bump that up to 63, which I hope is realistic. 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that is. Dew point. Actually, dew point, if it's a long way out, if it's not set nearly correct, you can get some strange effects. You can get sort of extra low cloud banks in some high terrain that I assume FSX is trying to emulate fog banks, but it will interfere with a VFR flight or glider flight. So it's a good idea to set this realistically based on your ambient temperature and your cloud base that you've selected in the Clouds tab. So I'm going to put a formula up on the screen that I use. It's just a rough formula to get it around about right. It worked. I worked it out that if I round it up a bit, it should be 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Dew point. That should give the cloud base roughly around what I've requested in the Clouds tab. Pressure at sea level, you could leave that at default. I happen to know that on the day I'm planning to fly it was 30.15 and I will actually change that only because it forces me to remember to change the altimeter setting. I want to keep in the habit of doing that. So now we'll look at visibility. A single layer of visibility is fine. I'm tempted to leave it at unlimited because in Australia we do get days of very good visibility. Very clear weather, quite often, not always. But I have noticed on all my trips to the US and Europe that tends to be nearly always quite hazy. So you might want to set this down to 30 miles or so, but I'll actually set it at 40. So slight concession towards realism, but I can still get a good clear view of my scenery, which is what I like. I like to, especially with all big scenery. So that's our global weather settings. That's all complete now, so we can OK all through that 3 times. So now we've got something going on up here. We've got a 3/8 coverage of cumulus clouds, high level cirrus above that. Actually, that 7/8 coverage looks about, could be about right. Anyway, the thermal energy hasn't changed much yet because I haven't changed the date and time yet. We do have some CumulusX clouds up there. I can see one just here. You notice they look a little bit different. When we get up at cloud base, they'll be harder to see, hopefully, in most cases, so it won't be quite so obvious. The number of active thermals is still only 45, so if you look at the trees, they're starting to change colour. We're really too late in the season. We're getting into autumn here. So CumulusX is not producing a lot of thermal activity. If we advance the date even further into autumn, we'll eventually reach a threshold where we won't get any thermals. So we need to fix that. We need to change the date and time. So to make it summertime, I'll choose actually July the 1st. With the time of day, I'm going to make the local time 14:30. It's sort of mid-afternoon kick-off. Hopefully that'll give us good thermal energy to work with. So we've got quite a difficult task ahead of us up in those hills. And that's all we need to do there. So now we've got to wait for the scenery to regenerate in the new season. Okay, so look at the thermal energy now. Much better, 3.69. The because we made changes to the date and time, the CumulusX reset the thermals back to 0 and starting to generate a new distribution. So we'll just have to wait for that to build up. While we're doing that, we will change our view. We'll go to an external outside view, top down, and I'm zoomed out at the moment. Normally you'd be zoomed in like this when you go to this view. Well, that might be too far. Probably like that, and might not be obvious that you can see the CumulusX clouds. So what you've just got to zoom out until they come into view, and you can see the whole distribution. If you go too far out, they'll disappear again. So, and now this is just the CumulusX clouds, not the FSX clouds. And you can see that we've got quite a good distribution of clouds now. There are sort of areas, as you know, in any random distribution you're going to get little clusters and areas devoid of clouds. That's what it's all about. We're going to be flying up in this area here, so at the moment our distribution looks quite good, but that can change over time. And that's the other thing we're watching here. What we're watching here is the life cycle of the clouds and the thermals. So thermals in CumulusX starts off as a blue thermal, and it rises up to cloud level, and then it forms a cloud over the top. That's what you see here, these popping clouds. The cloud can then grow in size, then it may shrink. Eventually the thermal underneath will die, and after a while the cloud will disappear. So just because you see a cloud here doesn't mean it's got a thermal underneath. It could be just a dud cloud, or a thermal's already died under it, and the cloud just hasn't gone away yet. Bigger clouds, generally speaking, mean a stronger thermal. But I think I've mentioned before, just because it's a CumulusX cloud doesn't mean there's an active thermal under it. So we can close the debug window. We can return to our glider view to reset the track IR. So we're pretty much ready to fly the task now, but that's coming in the next video. In part 2, the next video, I'll attempt to fly this task, but I'll also demonstrate some of the pre-flight and the post-flight analysis that I typically do.